Everyone. Oop. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to talk about what's been going on in Alabama and looking towards the future and what that means for us in assisted reproductive technology world. I'm here. My name is Alan Osborne. I'm the Chief Relations Officer with Family Source Consultants. I'm here with Ryan Ferrante from the law office of Ryan C. Ferrante. He's a renowned surrogacy attorney in Illinois. This is an important topic. Ryan's an advocate of modern family and formation. He's dedicated to presenting and preserving the rights of all parties in assisted reproduction arrangements. While Alabama clinics have resumed treatment under the new IVF law, and the State of the Union addressed reproductive rights nationwide at a federal level last week, it's important that we continue the conversations here. So that's why we're on our platforms, kind of going over this. If you guys have learned anything about this the last few weeks, things are changing, but we're trying to make things positive here because that's the way to go about things, right? So, Brian, what happened in Alabama 2 weeks ago?
Great question. Before I get to that, first of all, thank you so much for having me. As always, I love how you guys elevate the conversation and continue the conversation in meaningful ways. And you'll hear me say this throughout, but it's always critical that we don't just have the conversation. We got to act upon, find ways to act and find ways to make meaningful change. And I hope I have a couple of suggestions before we get off here. But I do think it's really important to start by telling you, your audience at least, about me and my family, to set the tone for this conversation. I would not have my two beautiful children, Eddie and Josie. I'll mention them again. I would not have them without IVF. So this is very personal to me. I'm an assisted reproduction attorney and a reproductive rights advocate, but I'm Eddie and Josie's dad. Okay. So while these conversations are happening all over the country, big and small, they're so important for families being treated for infertility or other conditions that prevent them from having a family, but also individuals and couples who are going to need this treatment in the future to have families of their own. So like you said, we're going to talk about what happened in Alabama, what it means, and where we're headed, which means that hopefully your audience can help prevent this from happening again in the future. So what did happen in Alabama? I'm sure everyone's heard the highlights, and so I'm going to keep it at a very high level. But like all fertility clinics around the country, there were embryos created in the IVF process. And when embryos are created in the IVF process, they're slowly frozen and stored cryogenically before they can be damaged by the formation of ice crystals, which is just a remarkable advancement of science. And so the more you think about it, and I love that this conversation has been elevated by not necessarily what happened, but more and more people are finding out what actually is IVF. And so then an unauthorized person, this remains the great mystery of what actually happened. An unauthorized person gained access to the lab, grabbed a vial, and then because they were going to get freezer burn, they dropped it, and that destroyed the embryos. So these embryos belonged to a couple who were rightfully devastated by the loss of the embryos, and they filed a lawsuit seeking accountability and a remedy for their loss. The lower courts did not take up the question of whether an embryo is a person in that wrongful death claim. But it was appealed to the Alabama Supreme Court, where in an 8-1 decision, believe it or not, 8-1, the name of the case was LePage versus the Center for Reproductive Medicine. The Alabama Supreme Court held that the definition of a child includes embryos, whether inside or outside a uterus. They used the term that I've never heard before, which was extrauterine children. Never heard that phrase before. And so in the opinion, if you haven't read it, there are Bible passages cited, which was new to me to see citations from the Bible, clearly indicating that this was a religious and politically motivated decision. They included phrases like the wrath of God. They referred to embryology labs as cryogenic nurseries, which implies that the embryos were children. And it sort of resurfaced the greater question of when does life begin, which is a question that has escaped many of us for a very long time. But however, the decision, the motivation for the decision and the fallout from it, it really can be sort of gleaned by reading the actual opinion. And after I had read through it, I thought to myself, what were they actually trying to say? I think you can probably do that by simply doing a word search. You can see that the word physician was used 5 times, meaning they weren't really relying on the opinions of physicians to tell them what IVF is. Science was used 4 times in 130 pages. Infertility was used 1 time. But God, the word God, was used 41 times. So I know that that's not, just cherry picking the word search is not the way to determine what their intent was, but it gives us a pretty good indication. And so I do want to be, before anybody gets upset, I do want to say I was raised in the faith. I was raised Catholic, went to Catholic schools, and I was raised to ask questions about my faith and to be respectful of others' faiths. But I don't think anyone can argue that this decision was anything but a theological one. So that's where we are. Now, we can talk about what it means, but the immediate fallout was that fertility clinics in Alabama were very concerned, obviously, about continuing treatment. So every clinic in Alabama suspended treatment. I think everyone, it might have been one that remained open, or continued IVF procedures pending further clarification on what the Supreme Court's decision meant. They were concerned that the destruction of any embryos could result in civil or criminal liability, rightfully so. But in the past week or so, we can talk more about this, but the Alabama legislature did pass a bill protecting IVF in the state, but it didn't go far enough. It said that it basically allowed Alabama fertility clinics to resume operations, but it didn't answer the question about the personhood of embryos, which was the crux of the Alabama Supreme Court decision. So you still have some clinics, including the one that was the subject of the original lawsuit, not resuming operations in the state of Alabama. So what this ultimately means, Alabama fertility patients are left in this limbo of not really understanding whether or not they can proceed with this necessary medical care. So that's where we are.
Right. So my wife and I have embryos created. They're sitting in a clinic in Alabama. I mean, what could we do with them at this point? Do they even know?
My recommendation would be nothing, right? Because if you have embryos sitting in an embryology lab in Alabama, of course you hope that you can proceed with that necessary care in Alabama so that you can have a family. Whether the clinic will proceed with a transfer of an embryo, that's going to be the clinic's decision based on their own interpretation of this new legislation that purports to provide protection for in case that transfer doesn't work. Now, the question I get all the time is, should I move my embryos? Should I move them to another clinic? And I would not. That would not be my advice either. Even short of understanding whether or not the companies that specialize in transferring that type of material to another clinic would even do it, because they may not want to take on the risk or the liability that the embryo could be destroyed in transit. And so these are questions that still remain as to whether or not we're going to see a mass exodus from Alabama of patients and their material. Is it going to impact whether or not reproductive endocrinologists or physicians in general want to practice in Alabama? What does it mean to the cost of IVF, even if they were to protect it in ways that made patients feel comfortable? It's only going to raise the cost of ensuring the clinics and the physicians to be able to practice in Alabama. So an already very expensive endeavor is only going to get more expensive as a result of what the Alabama Supreme Court is likely to become more expensive, I should say, as a result of what the Alabama Supreme Court has done. So to answer your question, I don't know that I would do anything yet until we had more clarity, just because I don't know that you're going to be able to get immediate action in the way that you were hoping by moving or attempting to move the material somewhere else.
Gotcha. So, I mean, what does this mean for all of assisted reproductive technology, like across the country?
It's a good question. There's it has opened the door, right? This part of a much longer conversation is the predictions that were made when Roe v. Wade was overturned was something like this, right? It gave license to groups to pursue these, not just these types of lawsuits that result in decreasing access to care, but also legislative efforts. And let me make this distinction. There's two different challenges to the definition of an embryo, right? And historically, we've seen this at state levels. And frankly, this is where the law should be giving deference to science, right? That's my opinion. I think that we should be listening to physicians and doctors of all sorts as it relates to what is the embryo, right? So where a basic understanding of the IVF process and the ways that it helps people to have families would have gone a long way in Alabama to informing the Alabama Supreme Court. If you read the opinion, you can understand just how misguided their decision was in this case. So the two challenges, the way to the great fear has always been that someone who doesn't understand the science might make a decision that an embryo does rise to the level of a person. And so how does that happen? It really can happen in one of two ways. Number one, a lawsuit like this that gets appealed up to the Supreme Court, and they were ultimately asked to interpret the Alabama wrongful death statute. Okay. And as an interpretation of that wrongful death statute, they came to the conclusion that an embryo was a child. Okay. So that's one way. Now, people have asked also, is this going to make it to the United States Supreme Court? I don't think so. Only because anyone who would appeal it to the United States Supreme Court does not want this United States Supreme Court to hear the case. Okay. So will it make it to the United States Supreme Court? Unlikely. Okay. Now, the second way that you could see the sort of personhood get attached to an embryo is through state legislation. Okay. State houses all across the United States now, at least, factions within the state houses are looking at introducing what are called personhood bills. So instead of a lawsuit, they're going to pass a law that says essentially an embryo is a child. And so throughout its own history, there's an organization called Resolve, the National Infertility Association. You're going to hear a lot about them the rest of this conversation. They, in my opinion, have always been the watchdog on these personhood bills.
Yeah,
they have their finger on the pulse of state legislatures introducing bills like this that could result in the same outcome that we saw with the Alabama Supreme Court holding. Okay. And so these personhood bills, they find experts to testify, and they rally advocates to oppose these bills that would result in the same outcome. So in summary, there's really two approaches that can end in the same way that we just saw, either through these lawsuits that where someone is asked to interpret some statute or the constitution of a particular state, or the passing of legislation that could define an embryo as a person. But I think actually, I want to mention one other thing too, because I don't want this to get lost. The Alabama, this is very, very important, because I think that a lot of people are your question about, your embryos in a clinic, not in Alabama, but somewhere else, right? Is there an impact? Right now, as of this moment, the Alabama Supreme Court decision is obviously limited to just Alabama, okay? And their Supreme Court's interpretation of the wrongful death statute in their constitution. So that's why we saw those clinics in Alabama suspend operations or suspend IVF procedures until they had a better understanding of their own potential liability from performing IVF. Okay, so does the Alabama Supreme Court decision have an immediate impact on any other clinic or any other patient other than those in Alabama? It does not. However, we need to be mindful and be very careful to watch for developments in other states, which we're starting to see, right? We're starting to hear about other state legislatures considering introducing personhood bills, and that's where the advocacy groups like Resolve come in.
Hey, we did a little switcheroo on you there.
Nice.
So Alan's having a little technical difficulty, but that's why we always have a backup, right? So
perfect. Let's hear it.
Great timing, though. We just had a question come through our Facebook page. Thank you to everybody who's watching. We have we can only track viewers on Facebook, but across all of our platforms, it looks like we have over 70 viewers right now. So anybody welcome, ask questions. Ryan is here. The first question, I'll go ahead and put it on the screen, is what can we do to protect our reproductive rights at a federal level? Maybe as parents, maybe as an agency, what can we do? How do we make a difference?
Whoever this is, it's almost like you asked this question directly of me, not in the chat. It is critically important that all patients, everyone who's willing to raise their hand and say, you guys don't understand what IVF is. Let us help you understand. Let us help you understand that I would not have my family without it. Okay. I'm going to keep emphasizing resolve, because I think that we need to be united and have one team approaching how we respond to not just this, but the next personhood bill or the next state court decision that could impact access to care. Okay. And this person asked about the federal level, and that is a critical part of the answer. There is a federal bill that was called the Access to Family Building Act, introduced by Senator Tammy Duckworth from Illinois, and don't hold me to this, Senator Patty Murray from Washington. Okay. They tried to introduce it in the Senate and get unanimous consent on a vote. I'm going to call out the party. It was blocked by the Republicans. They would not take up the bill for vote. Okay. Now, the bill, if it became law, it would establish a statutory right to access IVF and other assisted reproductive technologies and ensure that they remain legal and available everywhere in the United States. Okay. So How do we tell our elected officials, particularly the United States Senate, that we trust women to make their own reproductive decisions? How do we do that? There's one very simple way. I'm going to give you a few, but there's one simple way that I strongly encourage everyone to participate. Okay. And this is a conversation that you're going to have to remind decision makers really that embryos represent potential or hope to have a family, right? It's not a guarantee. We all know it's not a guarantee. No, we need them to know that. Okay. So for the past 5 years, I have, among many others, among hundreds of others, have gone to Federal Advocacy Day that is put on by Resolve and the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. What is it? What is Federal Advocacy Day? We, advocates, volunteers, meet with our elected representatives and say, we need your help. That's why we're here. We need your help. We need you to support the Access to Family Building Act. In the past, we had been talking about 4 or 5 other bills. Guess what? We're going to Washington this year and telling them about one. And when I say going to Washington, you're going to do it from your home. You do not need to travel. Okay. Okay. The way you and I are having this conversation right now, that's how you're going to meet with Senator Durbin or Senator Duckworth or, I don't know, Senator Cotton in Arkansas.
Senator anybody.
Senator anybody, right? Or their staffs, and tell them how important it is that we protect IVF. Okay? Resolve does all of the heavy lifting. They set up the appointments. They give you the information that you need to be prepared for the meeting. Guess what the information is that you need to be prepared for the meeting? Your own story. You are going to deliver a message to Washington that this is not acceptable. What is happening in Alabama cannot happen in my state, and we need you, federal legislators, to help us. Okay? Now, how do you do it?
I'm going to have Alan rejoin us right now because he wants to know how we do it too. Alan's back.
Let's do it. What's up, Alan?
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right.
Let's do this. We're figuring out how we can fight for reproductive rights with Resolve. Yeah. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. So you can go to resolve.org and sign up for Resolve's virtual Federal Advocacy Day. What will happen is they will know where you live. They will put you in your state's delegation. You will be trained as to what will happen on Advocacy Day. And then they will ask you if you want to share your story. Okay. And on Advocacy Day, you will be able to share that story. I am fighting for my family right now. I only have my family because of IVF. I can only have my family because of IVF. Here's another one. What about patients who are being treated for cancer and they need IVF to preserve their fertility? It's the only way they can have a family. What are we doing for them? Right? And so all of these approaches to IVF are not just, the simple explanation that the Alabama Supreme Court thinks it is, right? We need to tell them what IVF is. It's not a guarantee. It's hope. It's the potential to have a family. And for some, it's the only way. Yeah. And so signing up Federal Advocacy Day, virtual Federal Advocacy Day on resolve.org. There's also another website that gives you all the resources that you might need to handle this at a local level in your state. Fightforfamilies.resolve.org is that resource. Go there, sign up for the Resolve Advocacy Network. They will give you the information that you need, and then they will send a team of people to you, if necessary, to help you advocate at the state level.
And that website was what again, Ryan? Because I'm going to type it in the comments.
Fightforfamilies.resolve.org. Okay. And then you could do something the old-fashioned way. Send a letter to Congress, which, by the way, when you sign up for virtual Federal Advocacy Day, one of the things that you're going to be doing is also sending a letter. Resolve will give you the letter to sort of a template that you can modify to accommodate your own personal story. Virtual Federal Advocacy Day this year is on May 14th. It's 2 months away. Okay. State delegations have not even met yet. There is plenty of time to still sign up, but do it today. Get in your group with your state delegation, because on May 14th, all day long, we're going to be having conversations with federal legislators. I hope I answered the federal legislation question of your
I think you did.
audience.
I'm guessing the viewer would agree.
Okay.
How?
So, go ahead, Alan.
No, I was just going to say, like, is this happening in Alabama if the Dobbs decision didn't happen a few years ago? And are they connected
Difficult
at
to
all?
say. Difficult to say. I think that there's at least some loose connection between the two events. You know, I've thought about that. Obviously, that was a devastating or heartbreaking moment for the family building community. But unlike Roe v. Wade, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, I see this decision as a real opportunity. I think that there is, infertility and the struggle to build a family. There's never really any apparent silver lining, but I think that there is a long-term silver lining here, because guess what? We're having the conversation, which is a start. And so I keep repeating this: an embryo is hope. It's not a child. And I think it's very important that message continues to be delivered. I've tried to absorb as much as I could about the country's temperature on this. I mean, we saw it in the aftermath of Roe v. Wade. The country was like, oh my gosh, this is not what we wanted, right? The majority of the country said, this is not what we were pursuing, right? Here's the number. Get a load of this. CBS just had a poll. 86% of Americans support protecting IVF. That's an overwhelming majority. It's that simple. Okay. Now, on top of that, we have seen some really unexpected voices speak out in support of IVF. And I think what you're seeing, and I think that this might be maybe the disconnect from the Roe v. Wade, is the Roe v. Wade overturning, at least, is that, I'm paraphrasing them, but some of them are even saying, wait a second, we may disagree on abortion, but this is not what we meant by that, right? This was a bridge too far, right? We've even seen that in the past. I think, don't hold me to this, but I think there was a personhood bill that was introduced in the state of Mississippi several years ago. And the facts of this are true. I just can't remember if it was Mississippi or another state. I'm pretty sure it was Mississippi. And it was introduced in committee, which is the natural course of the bill. And it got out of committee or didn't make it out of committee because even the political parties that special interests that would like to see the overturning of Roe v. Wade said, wait a second, no, this goes way too far. We want people to have families and build families. We're pro-family. Well, so are we, right? We're pro-family in that we want to have families. Don't take that away from us, right? So these unexpected voices, I don't need to name them, but you can imagine that the most high profile of politicians have said, oh my gosh, we need to protect IVF. Guess who else has said it? The Attorney General of Alabama said that we will not use this decision to prosecute clinics and physicians for continuing to treat patients who need it. I mean, through a spokesperson, he said that, but he said it, right? They've been put into a really complicated position here, abortion opponents, because it's been clear, even if you just watch the question asked of Senator Tommy Tuberville from Alabama, you could clearly understand he has no idea what IVF is. None. He has no clue what IVF is, but he said he supports the decision. But he wants people to have families. It was like a word salad that was super messy, and we haven't heard from him since. So the bill that recently got passed in Alabama to sort of correct this, it was signed by the governor. It's enacted into law. It shields IVF clinics from civil or criminal liability. but it didn't address the personhood question. It didn't go far enough. And so that's why we need something at the federal level to sort of give us that federal level or umbrella of protection. And some clinics in Alabama have resumed services, but it's just a legislative Band-Aid that I think even the governor has said, this is a temporary solution. We need to go much further than this. So like I said, I'm very, very encouraged by the backlash, right? The backlash has been overwhelming, and we've been hearing support from some very unexpected corners.
Yeah, I mean, is it any sort of coincidence that this happened in an election year, or?
I think, it's a good question. I mean, I think you bring up, election year politics. I think it's surprising that something like this happened in an election year, but in the last 10, 12 years, is anything really surprising when it comes to politics?
No, I would say, to me, whether it was planned or not, I'm glad it did, because now these are key points that, as a parent who's going to need IVF to have a child, and two parents on this call who also had it, it's important that we do speak up and participate and make it known that we will not continue to accept anything less than federal protected rights. So let it happen this year, because now's the stage is huge. So now's when we can make a major impact. Yeah.
So I'll just say it one more time. I am very optimistic about what this means for the future. I think it means that many more people are going to be raising their voices, and that includes your entire audience. Sign up for Advocacy Day. Go tell your elected officials that that they work for you and you need their help.
Excellent.
Yeah. I mean, who was the gentleman you said that had this word salad that didn't understand IVF?
Senator Tommy Tuberville, former Auburn football coach.
It's just, I guarantee somebody in his family has been touched by IVF. I don't. It's more common than, I mean, obviously we live in this world. We talk to people struggling with it all the time. It's what inspired us to get into it. Having started our families through it, but everyone goes through it. Everyone has a family member or, a friend that's gone through this to start their family. And it's just, I think advocating for it the way you're talking about through Resolve, getting out there is the only way to really go after it right now.
They were sorry.
Okay.
I was going to say they were immediate in their response. This is like Resolve Super Bowl. When this happened, they had people on the ground immediately in Alabama, getting advocates to the state house to say this isn't going to work. We got to do something different. So,
I love that. I wanted to just remind everyone what you said earlier. There's no real silver lining to infertility, but IVF is a silver lining because it's hope. And so, let's fight for that hope, because sometimes that's all we need, just a little bit of hope. Whether it works or not, we just want to believe it can. So, well, thank you, Ryan, for joining us. Alan, did you have any other questions? A nice tag team effort here to get the main topic out.
About the technical difficulties.
It happens.
No, I don't. Ryan, thank you so much. I feel like I know so much more now.
Please keep having these conversations. Bring other people on and talk to them about it. And so this message, this conversation needs to keep happening. It's not something that we can turn our back on. And to everyone that's listening, go to resolve.org, sign up for Federal Advocacy Day. Even if you don't want to speak, by the way, you can be an observer. You can see how advocates from all over the country are speaking to their lawmakers. You can say, listen, I'm not comfortable speaking. Be there to support the people that are, right? We're going to show up in large numbers. Here's what the goal is. One last thing. The goal is to have a representative from every single congressional district in the country. There's 435. 7 of those are in Alabama. I need somebody from all 7 of those districts in Alabama to get us a meeting, because if there's not a constituent from a particular congressional district, we can't get a meeting. They won't take a meeting with us. So we need representation from each congressional district in the country. Chicago's covered.
I think that's important. And we have enough, people who come to us, hopeful parents. We have enough surrogates and egg donors that span the entire country. There's no reason why this can't be accomplished if we all work together.
Yep. We're going to fight it with optimism.
All right.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you. You guys have a lovely day.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.